Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into something pretty big, Cardano scaling, how they plan to handle way more activity.
Yeah, it's a crucial topic.
And look, we know you want the key info quickly without getting totally bogged down in the super technical stuff.
Yeah,
That's what we're aiming for here.
definitely.
We've looked through a bunch of things, project updates on Cardano scaling, Hydra and Paris technical docs, Mithril research, even blog posts looking at Laos and the future.
A good spread of sources.
Hopefully we can uncover some aha moments about how Cardano plans to grow and, support wider adoption.
Absolutely. Because for any blockchain that wants to be taken seriously, scaling isn't just nice to have, it's essential. And what's interesting with Cardano looking at these sources is how many different angles they're approaching it from.
Right.
Their vision, which comes through in the Cardano scaling stuff, is really about, empowering people, banking the unbanked, being a real decentralized option. It's ambitious.
This Cardano scaling initiative,
Yeah.
it's not just one thing then,
Yeah.
like one silver bullet.
No, not at all. It's more like a coordinated push across different projects, all trying to make Cardano faster, more flexible, easier to use for developers and for regular users.
Lowering the barrier to entry.
Exactly. Removing those barriers, trying to build a bigger ecosystem for scalable apps. And they're building the core tech themselves, like Mithril and Hydra, which is important, plus developing their own products on top.
Okay, let's start with Hydra. That's their layer 2, right?
Yeah.
What's the quick pitch for Hydra?
Right, Hydra. It's designed for two main things. Much faster transactions. So low latency, high throughput, and cutting down transaction costs.
How does it do that?
The core idea is the Hydra head protocol. You can think of it like setting up a temporary mini ledger off the main chain. It's highly configurable just for a specific group of participants.
Okay.
And critically, it uses the same transaction format, the same tools as the main Cardano chain. So developers don't have to start from scratch.
Ah, okay. So it's like a private fast lane using the same kind of road.
Okay.
I saw some benchmark numbers from, April 2025. What did those show speed-wise?
Yeah, those were pretty striking. The potential is, near instant for smaller setups. In a really basic test one node, 300 transactions, the average confirmation was just 4.6 milliseconds.
Milliseconds, seriously?
Seriously. Even when they scaled it up a bit, 3 local nodes doing 900 transactions, it was still only around 28 milliseconds confirmation time. That's incredibly fast compared to the main chain.
So for a small group using Hydra, it's almost blinking you miss it confirmation.
As much, yeah.
Okay, but there's always a but, isn't there? There's been talk in the community, especially around UTXO limits in Hydra. You mentioned the sources talk about commit transaction costs. What does that actually mean for using it?
Right. This is where we hit current practicalities. That table, the commit transaction costs. One, it shows tests setting up a Hydra head with different numbers of UTXOs, those little pieces of value on Cardano. And what it showed is, as you add more UTXOs to the initial setup, the memory needed goes up. They got decent performance up to about 54 UTXOs.
Only 54.
Well, in those specific tests, yeah. Beyond that, the memory usage got really close to the maximum budget allowed by the current system rules.
Ah, so the speed is great. But right now, you can't have too many participants or starting pots of value in one Hydra head because it hits memory limits.
Exactly. It's a current constraint tied to the cost models and memory limits they have now. But it also implies these things could be adjusted in the future,
Right. They're not set in stone forever.
And they are profiling these scripts, trying to understand the cost, size, memory, CPU, so they're clearly working on optimizing it.
So practically, Hydra heads seem best for smaller groups right now, maybe around that 50 UTXO mark.
Yeah.
What kind of real-world uses did that Future of Cardano document suggest are a good fit for current Hydra?
Yeah, that report was quite grounded. It mentioned things like micropayment channels, think small, frequent payments between a set group.
Like tipping, maybe?
Yeah.
Or streaming payments?
Potentially, yeah. Also recurring transfers, maybe even some simple games with just a few players in a session.
Okay. But probably not the best tool for, say, a huge decentralized exchange with thousands of people trading constantly. Or like an open auction anyone can join.
Exactly. The report highlights the bottlenecks. There's that output limit we talked about, roughly 50 under the current model. There's the fact that everyone involved needs to commit their UTXOs up front.
Right.
And everyone needs to be online and trust the same underlying script or code.
So it's quite constrained.
Yeah, these things mean it functions more like, the state channel analogy fits. It's more like a private room or a game lobby than a wide open public utility right now.
Got it. Clear limits, but useful for specific things.
Hmm.
Okay, let's shift gears to Mithril. Sounds kind of epic. What problem is Mithril aiming to solve?
Huh, yeah, the name is cool. Mithril is about making things robust but also lightweight. It's what they call a stake-based threshold multi-signature scheme.
Okay, break that down a bit.
Right. It's designed to tackle fundamental issues like how quickly new nodes can sync up with the blockchain, how you establish trust in the state of the chain without checking everything yourself. Basically, efficiency and trust bootstrapping.
How does stake play into it?
The core idea is to use the collective stake the ADA held and staked by network participants to create really compact, combined signatures that prove the state of the blockchain at a certain point.
So if I'm firing up a new Cardano node, I don't have to download and check every single block from the very beginning. Mithril gives me a shortcut based on what the majority of stake is saying.
That's the gist of it, yes. How it works roughly is that a random-ish group of participants, chosen based on their stake, are eligible to sign off on a snapshot of the chain data.
Okay.
If enough stake hitting a certain threshold backed these individual signatures, they can be combined into one single, very small multi-signature. The really clever bit is that this combined signature barely grows in size, even if lots of people sign. It's very efficient. Logarithmic growth, technically.
Logarithmic, right. So where would I, as just a regular Cardano user, actually feel the benefit of Mithril?
The most direct place is probably if you run a full node wallet, like Daedalus. Mithril makes syncing way, way faster.
No.
Instead of grinding through potentially years of history, your node can grab these Mithril-certified snapshots, verify them quickly, and get up to speed much faster. Saves a ton of time and computer resources.
That's a huge user experience win for full node users. What about light clients? Like mobile wallets. The sources mentioned those too.
Exactly. Mobile wallets or other light clients don't have the resources to download and check the whole chain. Mithril gives them these aggregated signatures. Think of them like super secure checkpoints.
Trustworthy snapshots.
Precisely. It lets these light wallets operate fast and securely, knowing the state of the chain without needing a full node or trusting a third party completely. It's a trustless way to get up to speed.
So Mithril faster, lighter blockchain verification. Are there other potential uses mentioned?
The research papers touch on a few other areas. Things like making the verification of, say, voting results more efficient, or potentially streamlining governance decisions. Anywhere you need to securely confirm the consensus of a large group based on stake, Mithril could potentially help.
Interesting. Okay, Mithril handles bootstrapping and fast syncing. Let's move to Ouroboros Paris. This one's about faster settlement, right? What exactly is settlement in blockchain terms, and why speed it up?
Good question. Settlement is basically the point where you can be really, really confident a transaction on the blockchain is permanent, that it won't get reversed because of some network weirdness, like a temporary fork or chain reorganization.
Because blockchains can sometimes have competing versions of history for a short time.
Exactly, especially with protocols like Cardano's Ouroboros Praus, which is based on Nakamoto consensus like Bitcoin. Block creation is probabilistic. There's always a tiny, tiny chance a longer chain could emerge and overwrite recent blocks.
And on Cardano now, how long does it technically take for a transaction to be considered fully settled, like super secure?
Well, the theoretical parameter, K, suggests waiting for 2,160 blocks after your transaction. That works out to roughly 12 hours.
12 hours.
Yeah. Now, in practice, significant forks are rare and short ones resolve quickly. But that 12-hour theoretical finality can be a drag for things that need fast, high-certainty confirmation, like maybe exchanges or certain DeFi applications.
12 hours is definitely not instant. So how does Paris plan to slash that time?
Paris adds an extra layer. It introduces a committee of block-producing nodes, stake pools, who actively vote on blocks using their stake weight.
Voting. How does that help?
Instead of just following the longest chain, Paris uses a heaviest chain rule. Blocks that get enough votes from this committee are certified and given extra weight.
So a certified block is harder to undo, even if a slightly longer but uncertified chain appears.
Exactly. Think of it like adding anchors to the block. Once it's certified with enough stake-weighted votes, the probability of it being rolled back becomes vanishingly small, much, much faster.
Okay, so this voting adds a layer of explicit confirmation to speed up finality. What kind of settlement times are they aiming for with Paris?
The goal is a dramatic improvement, potentially getting settlement down to just minutes. The idea is, once your transaction is in a block that gets certified, you could be highly confident it's final within, say, a minute or two.
Wow, from 12 hours theoretical down to minutes. That's huge.
It really changes the game for applications needing that speed and certainty.
Does this voting add extra costs or change staking rewards for SPOs or delegates?
Not directly, no. Paris is mainly a change to the consensus rules. It doesn't really touch transaction fees or how staking rewards are calculated.
No.
There is a slight increase in network bandwidth needed for the stake pool operators doing the voting, but the papers suggest it's pretty modest.
And implementing this requires a hard fork, right? A network-wide upgrade.
Yes, Paris would require a hard fork combinator event to activate.
How does Paris fit with the other scaling stuff?
Yeah.
Like Laos, which we haven't talked about yet. Do they work together?
Yeah, they're designed to be complementary. Paris tackles settlement speed, how fast transactions become final. Laos, on the other hand, is about increasing the volume of transactions the network can handle the throughput.
Different problems, different solutions.
Exactly. You could potentially run Laos on top of Paris, getting both high throughput and fast settlement. The concepts seem compatible.
Okay, Paris for fast finality.
Okay.
Now, the big one maybe. Ouroboros Laos, described as a major redesign for massive throughput increases. What's wrong with the current Ouroboros price that Laos needs to fix for, like long-term global-scale usage?
Right, Laos is definitely ambitious. The core issue with Prouse, as the Laos papers explain it, isn't really the raw power of the computers running the nodes. It's more about the fundamental structure of how data flows and how consensus works.
How so?
In a linear blockchain like Prouse, there's often inherent waiting time built in. Like, while a new block is propagating across the network, many nodes are just waiting, not actively processing new transactions.
Yeah.
Laos sees this as potential capacity being wasted.
So Laos tries to use that idle time better, to process more things at once.
That's the core idea. Laos aims for huge increases in data throughput, script execution throughput, and ultimately transaction throughput. The simulations mentioned are targeting over 1,000 transactions per second.
1,000 TPS. That's a massive jump.
It is. And crucially, they aim to do this while keeping Cardano's security strong, resisting attacks even from adversaries with a lot of stake and maintaining decentralization.
How on earth does it achieve that kind of parallel processing?
The key innovation is moving away from a strictly linear chain. Laos introduces a concurrent blockchain structure. Imagine multiple blocks being created and processed roughly at the same time, at the same logical level.
Multiple blocks at once. Sounds potentially chaotic. How do you keep track? How do you prevent conflicts, like someone trying to spend the same money in two different parallel blocks?
It definitely sounds complex. Laos uses what they call an optimistic approach. It involves concepts like sharding to separate transactions that don't depend on each other. Multiple blocks containing transactions are processed in parallel.
Okay.
Then, as these parallel streams come together, the protocol establishes a single definitive order for all the transactions across all those concurrent blocks. If there are conflicts like that double spend attempt, the system has rules to detect and resolve them. Usually the first valid one gets in, the conflicting ones get tossed out.
And Cardano's specific transaction model, the extended UTXO model, helps make this parallel stuff work.
Absolutely crucial. The EUTXO model is very explicit about what each transaction consumes, inputs, and creates outputs. This deterministic nature makes it much easier to see potential conflicts between transactions, even when they're being processed in parallel. You know exactly what box of value is being used.
So that EUTXO clarity is actually an advantage for this kind of advanced parallel processing.
It seems to be yes. It provides the structure needed to manage that concurrency safely.
I remember reading something about Laos having a 3-tier block structure. Input blocks, endorsement blocks, ranking blocks. What's that about?
Yeah, that's part of how it manages the workflow. Input blocks are created frequently, just containing raw transactions from users. Then, endorsement blocks group these input blocks together. Nodes chosen by stake lottery validate and endorse these bundles.
Okay.
Once enough endorsements pile up for a set of input blocks, they're considered valid. Finally, ranking blocks come along less often. They look at all the valid endorsement blocks and establish the final, definitive order for everything. It separates the tasks collecting transactions, validating them, and ordering them to enable more parallelism.
Wow. That is a fundamental shift in architecture. Huge potential. But it's important to remember, Laos is still research, right? Not live yet.
Exactly. Very much still in the research and development phase. It's Cardano's long-term vision for layer 1 scaling, but not something you can use today.
Okay. We've hit the big ones: Hydra, Mithril, Paras, Leos. The sources also briefly mentioned something called ALBA. What's its role?
ALBA was mentioned as a novel cryptographic proof, a proof of knowledge specifically. It lets you build certificates from lots of individual things like signatures or votes, assuming most of them are honest. It seems like another specialized crypto tool they might use to improve efficiency or security in certain parts of the system. Less of a headline feature, more of a supporting technology, maybe.
Got it. Another tool in the box. So let's pull back a bit. We've got all these different solutions working at different layers. How does this all actually benefit people using Cardano, like end users, developers, stake pool operators?
Okay, for end users, the most direct impacts would be things like faster transaction confirmations, that's Paras, and Hydra for specific uses. dApps should feel more responsive, and maybe, just maybe, exchanges might lower their confirmation requirements thanks to Paras's faster finality.
That would be nice.
For light client users, think mobile wallets. Mithril is the big win. Faster, secure startup without downloading the whole chain.
And for the developers building things.
Well, Leos holds the promise of much higher throughput. That could open the door for applications that just aren't feasible today. But we have to be realistic. That Future of Cardano report also pointed out that actually developing complex things with EUTXO and Plutus or Aiken still has its challenges.
Like the developer experience.
Yeah, especially for highly dynamic DeFi apps, it's different from account-based chains. And composability, making different dApps work together smoothly, is still an area of development.
What about the stake pool operators, the SDOs?
They get to participate directly in the Paras voting, which is a new role. And generally, if all this scaling leads to more network activity, more transactions, that should be good for the SPOs running the infrastructure.
Okay, so benefits across the board, potentially. But we've also touched on limitations. Hydra's UTXO constraint, Leos being R&D. What other current limits or challenges did the sources flag?
That Future of Cardano PDF was pretty candid. It mentioned ongoing limits on transaction size on the main chain, which can affect complex smart contracts.
Right.
The CPU and memory limits for Plutus scripts are still a big factor. They directly cap how complex a DeFi transaction, for instance, can be in one go.
So you might have fast settlement with Paras, but the complexity of what you can do in one transaction is still constrained.
Exactly. And Mithril, while technically functional, isn't universally adopted yet by all wallets and services, so its benefits aren't felt everywhere just yet. The summary was kind of like, you could use Hydra for, say, super fast coffee payments between friends soon, but running a massive global marketplace on it today, that's still a ways off.
So the vision is powerful, but the near-term reality involves navigating these hurdles.
Absolutely. The report suggested the near-term focus is really on improving the developer tooling, getting more light clients using Mithril, and finding those niche use cases where Hydra works well today, like stable micropayments.
And midterm.
Midterm, maybe we see Leos go live, maybe script limits increase. The really long-term vision, becoming a sort of global financial OS, hinges on nailing the tech, yes, but also on sustainable governance and funding.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Definitely.
This has been super helpful, really laying out the different parts of Cardano's scaling strategy. We've got Hydra for layer 2 speed in specific scenarios, Mithril for fast syncing and light clients, Paras for quicker layer 1 settlement, and then the big future ambition of Leos for massive layer 1 throughput.
Yeah, it's clearly a multi-pronged attack on the scaling problem, adjusting bottlenecks at different levels.
But also acknowledging that some pieces are ready now with certain limits, others are works in progress, and the real-world application still faces constraints they're actively working on.
Precisely. It's a picture of ongoing research and development, building towards that larger vision step by step. The progress is tangible, even if the end goal is still down the road.
Okay, so thinking about all these approaches, Hydra, Mithril, Paras, and the potential future with Leos, here's something to chew on. What completely new kinds of dApps or use cases could actually become practical on Cardano in the next few years because of these scaling efforts? And, maybe more importantly, what hurdles, technical or otherwise, are the most critical ones left to overcome to make that future happen?
That's a great question to ponder.
Something for you to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.